Welcome back under my bed, guys. It's not been that long actually. I think I make these a little too often, to be honest. But sometimes I just need to talk about boring things for a long time, and this is where I do that. So welcome. Today's gonna be an especially interesting one, because I'm talking about politics and philosophy. So my inspiration for making this video or podcast, whatever, is I joined Digibro's Discord, and immediately I was asked about my political opinions, and I was like, well, I replied in the usual manner, as I do when I'm asked these things, which was, I said that I'm an anarchist, and so I got some shit. If this is making noise, then apologies. I said I'm an anarchist, and then immediately there was a bunch of other anarchists in the server who were like, oh great, you'll fit in great here, let's talk about Bakunin and Kropotkin and all that shit. And I was like, engaging in the conversation, but not really wanting to. And then I never went back to that politics channel again, because it's just fucking, that's not what I am. I generally say that I'm an anarchist because it's the simplest way to, it's the most recognizable thing, that opinion that I have. But there's a lot of different ways to be an anarchist, and I'm not the usual one. For example, I don't necessarily oppose all hierarchy or all unjustified hierarchy, because I believe that whoever says that hierarchies are justified or unjustified, like, who gets to decide that? That's bullshit. I'm also not a big fan of democracy, and anarchy or traditional left anarchism is heavily based on direct democracy, and I think people are way too stupid to be in charge of what I do. I don't want someone else voting to tell me what to do. I want to tell me what to do, so not a big fan of that either. And I'm also not a big fan of anyway, so I'm not that sort of anarchist. So when someone asks me, well, okay, how do you propose we deal with murderers in an anarchist society, anarchist state, is essentially what they're asking. An anarchist state, or in an anarchist civilization. And I'm like, how do you deal with them? I don't care how you deal with them, I know how I'm going to deal with them. Someone tries to murder me, I'm going to shoot them with my bigger gun. And then they're like, bigger gun? That sounds like Darwinism to me. That makes me really uncomfortable that you could even think such a thing, of having a bigger gun than someone else. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Well, what do you propose? This is almost as funny as that one time in school. I met this Afrocentrist, maybe not. What's the word? Afrofuturist, Black anarchists, and like, you know what I'm saying, black anarchists, Afrofuturism, that sort of stuff. And he literally said that he wants anarchist police, that he doesn't think that, because I asked him, like, how do we deal with racists without a state, and he said that he wants anarchist prisons and anarchist police. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? These people, they say they want something, but they're so scared to have any sort of non-safety. They're so scared of actually changing. They're so infected by... They are so infected by ideology. That was a terrible Zizek impression. But their ideology is so ingrained in them that they can't even imagine a world without police or prisons. Now, a lot of anarchists don't go that far, but they still don't really. They just want to abolish the state in name. It's kind of like how commies want to abolish, it's that famous quote: "The people are not much more happy about being beaten by a stick if it's called the people's stick." But a lot of even though that was made by an anarchist, a lot of anarchists still fall for that shit. Like, okay, we're not going to have a state, but we are going to have a centralized group of syndicates where these particular group of people get to decide what you can and can't do. And we are going to have a determined area where we exist. And we are going to have a militia that is heavily governed. And we are going to have rules. It's like, what you've done there is get rid of the state and replace it with something that performs all of the same functions as a state. And I just call that another state. So, call me a dickhead, but that's not really... That's not what I want. That's not at all what I want. That sounds like bullshit to me. That sounds like you're a pussy who is scared. And I don't fuck with pussy ass bitches. I only fuck with true anarchs. So something closer to that would probably describe me. But even still, that's not quite good enough, because the only true, like the way that I'm more of an anarchist is that like I oppose the state in all its forms, and I oppose capitalism in all its forms. Well, actually, I don't this might get me in a little trouble, but I don't necessarily think markets are the worst thing possible. I don't like markets. I'm not a massive fan of markets, but I don't necessarily I would be relatively okay if markets were just confined to a tiny place. I think they're an okay system for distributing scarce resources, but they should be completely optional. You should be able to completely get by with your life never handling money. I don't think that it would be I don't necessarily think you should ban people from choosing to. This sounds pretty ANCAP-y, but I don't think you should necessarily ban people who want to do that sort of thing. But they should be. I don't believe in the voluntary hierarchies that ANCAPs believe in, but I don't necessarily think that markets are. How do I explain this? It would be okay to have a little market, I wouldn't mind having a little market, but I wouldn't want it to be important. I don't really have that much thought about this sort of stuff. I just sort of mentioned it in brief. I definitely don't think capitalism is good, if that's what you're asking, hypothetical person. Capitalism is bad. So that's how I'm an anarchist. I don't think any of these things should exist, but I'm definitely not a leftist as well, because mainly because I have problems with collectivism, and I'm anti-civilization as well. How do I explain this? So firstly, I don't think that the collectivist versus individualist dichotomy is particularly useful, because both of those categories are essentially meaningless. Collectivism, collectives are made up of individuals, and no matter where you go, everyone's connected. So there really isn't that much of a difference between those sorts of things. But I definitely, if you have to put me in one of those categories, I definitely tend away from collectivism, because I think this might be a little SJW-y for me to say, but I find collectivism to be pretty ableist. For us non-neurotypicals, collectivism doesn't help at all, because you have to, as soon as you have a collective of people, it is impossible to have a collective of people without marginalizing the groups that are on the edges of the bell curve, who tend to be non-neurotypicals and people like me who can't do socializing very well, and I don't think social skills should be something that's particularly important in the world. I don't like social skills as like having the importance that they have, and especially if you're non-neurotypical, if you're autistic or something like that, have anxieties or depression or schizophrenia or anything like that, instantly you're fucked in any sort of collectivist system, because you are going to be on those bell curve, on the edges of those bell curves, and the normies aren't going to care about you enough to give you what you need to survive, because under collectivism you can't do that. But you could argue that in some sort of under individualism, those people are also fucked. Us people are also fucked, because people who need support are fucked, which is why I'm a strong proponent of mutual aid, which I don't think is actually collectivist or individualist. I think mutual aid is the synthesis of collectivism and individualism, which should be the ideal way to do things. Also a big fan of the Union of Egoists, which is just a fancy way of saying friendship. I think a group of people who are, although I do have problems with Stirner, especially the idea of self-interest. Like, I think I used to be much more of a Stirnerite when I first read The Ego on Its Own, but now I'm much more critical of him. Especially the idea of self-interest is a bit flawed to me, because it's like, do people actually know what is... most of the time, to actually be able to always act in your self-interest, you would have to be omniscient and omnipotent. But people that don't always know what is the best for them. And also the idea of best is completely, like, how do you actually know? Like, how do you measure best? How do you measure what is in your interest? You can't. And how do you... And not only that, but people often don't have the will, the opportunity to do it, to do what may be best for them, and oftentimes may not even know what it is that they want or what it is that's best for them. A lot of people it's very easy for people to be tricked by, I guess this is what Sternum says by spooks, but like that as long as you've removed all the spooks from your brain, then you can act in your self-interest. But certain things are kind of spooky and not spooky at the same time. Certain things could be considered spook by some people and not by others. So I still don't think it's particularly helpful. I mean, I'm not against acting in your self-interest, but I don't necessarily think it's the only rule that you should ever follow. The main thing I get from Stirner is not being a moralist. I think that's terrible, and there's other things as well, but I'm definitely not a big fan of morals or moralism. I basically only hold one moral opinion, which is antinatalism. I believe that life is suffering, and also life is death. Without death, life would be something completely different. Without the ability to die, it doesn't mean, like, if you were like a vampire who lives forever unless you're killed by something, then that's still being alive, because the option of death is still there. But if you are like a god, you can't necessarily be said to be alive in the same way that a human or an animal is alive. They're also really, really not a fan of humanism or human centrism. I think humans are way too confident in their supremacy. I don't think humans are actually even close to being the supreme beings on this planet, or should necessarily prioritize themselves. But I'm also not like a fan of... I'm not against animal rights, but I'm not a super big proponent. Like, don't care about veganism. I think that's just a bourgeois moralism stuff. I'm not... It's not something as... Like, people get too hung up on these little details, like eating meat or not eating meat. I mean, factory farming is probably a bad thing, but my point is on a bigger scale, that humanism is bad, because I would class myself as a post-humanist. I'm not a transhumanist, post-humanist. I don't think we should be aiming to continue humanity for as long as possible. In fact, I think we should be aiming to do the opposite. I think we should be aiming to either to no longer be human, or whichever direction you choose to go in, up or down. So that could be taken as anti-sentience hyper-primitivist, Moss World now, I am the nuclear war now, or the other way around, which I actually think are the same thing. I think this is my cyber nihilism coming in. If you don't know what cyber nihilism is, it's kind of a half-baked idea. It's a synthesis between primitivism and transhumanism, and I think that's a great start, but I don't necessarily think that what's written on cyber nihilism right now is necessarily enough. And also it's definitely a little dodgy. I mean, I still like it and would recommend it to a lot of people, but it's only the very beginnings of an ideology. I think critical self-theory is very important here, and synthesizing your own ideology and your own way of looking at the world with regards to it, because it's only like a base, something to take into account, something to loot from the ideological supermarket, but not an entirely fully formed opinion or thought or anything. But I do think it's useful to look at this post-human, anarchistic, wired, post-meat space cyber nihilism. I think it's very useful to build relevant ideologies in this current time period. What else? I'm also pretty strongly anti-work. Like, my opinions vary from relatively practical to completely esoteric, which is fun. I think that no one should ever work, and that the system should be based on ludism instead of this idea of work. Hunter-gatherer tribes draw no distinction between the times when you're working and playing. Animals don't have a sense of work. It's all the same thing, and humans are fucked for inventing something like that. I think it needs to die as fast as possible for everyone. And if that means that humanity dies out because no one wants to farm anymore, then so be it. I don't give a fuck. I don't really care about nature. I don't think nature is real. I don't think there's a separation between what's natural and unnatural, because anything, as soon as something's done, it becomes natural. Humans evolved a process of nature, so anything that humans do is also a process of nature. As I said, I don't think humans are the supreme beings on the planet. That would probably go to bryophytes or mosses, or perhaps mollusks, or bacterium, microphages. I'm also very interested in virus. Viruses are very cool, but they're not even alive. Like, that's why I like them so much, because they're not even alive, but they still self-replicate, which is fucking sick. I love them. I believe that there's layers to reality. I don't think that what we necessarily experience is reality. I think this is self-evident, because the human senses are so limited. Like, if you even just something like the amount of sound spectrum that we hear, or the amount of the light spectrum that we see, and even the very fact of like hearing is such a strange thing. It's such a weird sense. Smell is such a weird sense, like, to have. Light makes a little more sense, but it's still subjective and incredibly limited. So it's very obvious that we don't see all of reality, and then there's also like a bunch of shit that we just physically can't see due to our dimensions, like, or even can't think about. This is why I am incredibly skeptical of any notions of what it means to be human or that sort of thing, because I think that the only way to truly know human consciousness would be to make any statement about humanity. You would have to be an outside observer, not limited by being a human brain, and I don't think that's possible unless we meet an alien and ask it, which, hey, maybe one day. That would be cool. What else? I'm not a transhumanist. I used to be much more of a transhumanist, but I've recently become much more skeptical about whether it's even possible to do something like upload your brain to a computer, because I was assuming that consciousness is like software running on hardware, whereas in reality it's almost certainly not that. And also the idea that transferring consciousness is more like a copy and paste, not a cut and paste. So I don't know what comes from that. I'm more skeptical. As I say in the song Instrumentality, my soul lives on inside the machine, don't care that it isn't even me. Because when you cut and paste a consciousness into a computer, it no longer is you, it's a different thing. Right, which is fine, I don't really care about that, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm much more skeptical when it comes to that sort of thing. Let me think, what else is there to mention? Oh yeah, this might get me in a little trouble. I hope it doesn't come across as like transphobic or anything. Obviously, I'm completely in favor of trans rights and LGBT rights and all that sort of shit. I would like to add on to that I think I'm even more in favor of those things than the majority of the LGBT community, for this reason. The LGBT rhetoric is heavily based on this idea that there's no choice, which is true. You're born gay, you're born trans, whatever. You don't have a choice, and that is why they should be doing like we are, whatever, doing what we're doing, right? Which I think is fine, but I think it would be actually better if it wasn't a born this way type thing. If it was a choice, if you just woke up one day and you were like, you know what, I'm kind of bored, think I'm gonna go turn into a girl, and you just did it, and that was something that was completely fine, that would be sick. That's the ideal, right? Because I don't like this idea of needs being the only thing that matters. Like, wants are still important. There's nothing wrong with wanting things. It's kind of something that's very to ignore it would be it's like an asceticism. It's like something religious. I'm very much against anything that seems like a religion. This is one of the main things that scared me away from leftism, is that it's so close to a religion, it's almost terrifying. Like, it's almost so obviously a religion, and so obviously, like, once you notice that, you can't unnotice it. You can't unnotice the similarities between the Marxist meta-narrative and the Christian meta-narrative. And once you do notice that, immediately you can become a lot more skeptical of all these sorts of things. As for accelerationism, I don't go around calling myself an accelerationist, but I don't hate accelerationism either. I think it's kind of basic and undeveloped, but I like it. I like the I haven't read enough. I really need to up my reading, but I like it. I need to read Deleuze and Guattari first, and then read some more before I can make a actual statement. I'm pretty big into postmodernist ideologies or whatever. I don't think that they're there was a recent study that at the quantum level there is no objective reality. I used to be really big into physics, so this stuff's still interesting to me. I highly suggest you look this up. So, observers is not a human concept. The universe works with observers. Observers are a physics thing. Like, observation is a physics phenomenon. It's not a human phenomenon. Therefore, let's say I talk about the uncertainty principle a lot of times, but there's been this thought experiment that if two observers were to look at the same quantum event, both could correctly observe conflicting realities, and it was recently tested and found to be true that two observers can observe the same quantum event and come away with both correct observations that were conflicting realities. That's so fucking cool to me. but also proves my point that there is no objective reality. It's all nonsense. I think that delirium is much closer to the state of reality than actual sober thinking or normal headspaces. I think delirium is much closer to the nature of the universe, just like super chaotic to the point of nonsense. I quite like Lovecraftian horror, but I don't necessarily think it's the best type of horror. Like, the idea that this... Maybe it's because I've just been presented with the fact that there's things so big that your brain can't even comprehend it from a very young age, from thinking about astrophysics. I wanted to be an astrophysicist for a very long time, and like thinking about how far away Andromeda is from the Milky Way, like how many fucking light years that is. It's just such an insane distance that something like, oh, there could be creatures up there that are so much more big than humanity that we can't even imagine them without going insane. It's like, yeah, that's not that crazy for me. Much more horrifying to think about human, like I'm much more of a fan of human psychological horror, although I do like that sort of stuff. I also quite like body horror as well. This isn't really politics anymore. I'm quite I don't like the tendency away from chaos. I quite like chaos. I think it's fine. I think it's actually, since it's oh yeah, I only briefly mentioned antinatalism, but I should go more into depth about how humans are fucked. If you just watch my video on Moss for more about that. I'm gonna politics quiz. I've seen some people answering this on Twitter, so I want to see if I can find it and answer it here. Nope. Well, I guess I can't see it. I'm gonna scroll through my Twitter feed and see if I can find someone answering it. My opinions are quite heavily based on Serial Experiments Lane, which is, but not necessarily. I mean, how do I explain this? Not necessarily what was intended to be seen. I think I read a little too deep into that anime, but it's very cool. It's a very cool show. What the fuck is this? This is not going well. I can't find. I swear I saw someone answering this quiz earlier, but I guess not. I was like, it's fine. I'll just scroll back down to it when I'm doing the video. Turns out, things are never this easy. Nope. Well, there you have it. This has not gone particularly well. Fuck. You know what? I'm gonna pause this recording and I'm gonna come back once I found the thing. I forgot you could do that. Alright, I've decided to just do the politiscale thing, even though it's fucking terrible because it doesn't reflect. It doesn't make any sense. Actually, let me try 8 values instead. 8 values is slightly better, but I still hate it because it doesn't. There's no anti-civilization option, and I am heavily anti-civ. Click here to start. I'll just do it now. You'll be presented with a series of statements. Okay. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. I disagree with that. Both of these are the same amount of concern. It's necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Well, under a capitalist system, yes. Under my ideal post-human system, there would be no government and there would be no economy. So this is why it's stupid. but I'm just going to say disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. Strongly disagree. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all systems. Strongly disagree. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market. I agree with that. International trade is beneficial. I don't really care. Not important. I'll just do neutral, unsure. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. It's fine. It's fine. I don't necessarily think it's great. Like, I don't like the idea of needs, because, like, as soon as you say that sort of thing, you just raise more questions than you answer. Like, I know it's a really simplified version of communism, but this is, like, one of the problems that I don't like about it, because who decides what is someone's ability, and who decides what are someone's needs? Like, if you get to decide that for yourself, then it's fine. But then that is closer to wants than needs, which I think is good. But, you know, it's like, am I making sense here? Like, ability seems like something that you should be able to measure, but can you actually measure it? And like, it gets down to a grey area, especially, as I said again, with collectivism. It's not good for non-neurotypicals, because someone might be unable to work in the same way. I don't like this. I'm going to disagree. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favour of private charities. Strongly disagree. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor. Agree. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. Strongly disagree. Public utilities like roads should be publicly owned. Strongly agree. Well, I'm talking in a capitalist system. Obviously, I don't care. You get what I'm saying. Excessive government intervention is a threat to the economy. Strongly disagree. Those with a greater ability should receive better healthcare. Strongly disagree. Quality education is a right of all people. Once again, this is bullshit, because I don't like schools. I think schools are just prison camps for children. It's not a coincidence that schools resemble prisons and factories. They all care about the same time. I mean, if you want it, you can have it, but you shouldn't be forced, and you definitely shouldn't be forced by your parents to do such a thing, which I think is inevitable. Quality education is a right of all people. See, these questions are so loaded. This is why I don't fucking like this shit. Like, what does quality education entail? Who gets to decide what's taught to who? Like, if it's voluntary, that's fine. I don't like the idea that children are completely unable to decide anything for themselves. I think children are much more able to decide things for themselves than most people give them credit for. So children should be allowed to decide what they learn and how much they learn, and shouldn't be disadvantaged because of this. Also, there should be no children. Anti-natalist gang. So I guess I could say yes, I agree that quality education is a right of all people. However, probably not in the same way that this test thinks quality education means. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. I don't like the word workers there, but sure. The United Nations should be abolished, and sure, fine, get rid of it. Military action by a nation is often necessary to protect it. Not by my nation, really, so disagree. I support regional unions such as the European Union. This is such bullshit. This is such small scale, inconsequential shit. I don't care about the fucking EU. Like, I'd rather we remained, but that's not. Dude, it's such a fucking small scale state question. I don't give a fuck. You pick between a neoliberal super state and a neoliberal hell state. They're the same thing. Ugh, fuck's sake. I support regional unions. Fine. You know what? If it stops war, then that's fine. It's important to maintain our national sovereignty. Strongly disagree. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind. Maybe if it was run by an AI, but disagree. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. Once again, loaded terms. Peaceful relations is often relations based on tension. Strength is just some bullshit thing. So I'm going to agree, but I don't like that question. Wars do not need to be justified to other countries. I agree with that. but I don't think countries should exist. But I don't think wars need to be justified. I don't think wars can be justified. Military spending is a waste of money, agree. International aid is a waste of money. Depends how it's used. A lot of international aid is actually bad, like it ruins the economy of that country. So I'm gonna agree here skeptically. And I don't necessarily think it's a waste of money, but it's often bad. And I'm gonna agree. My nation's great, strongly disagree. Research should be conducted on an international scale, strongly agree. Government should be accountable to the international community, agree. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable, strongly disagree. Violence is necessary. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. My religious values are lame, so strongly agree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible, strongly disagree. It's very important to maintain law and order, strongly disagree. The general populace makes poor decisions, agree. Victimless crimes such as drug use should not be crimes at all, strongly agree. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism, strongly disagree. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world, strongly disagree. The very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty, strongly agree. Regardless of political opinions, it's important to side with your country, strongly disagree. No authority should be left unquestioned, strongly agree. A hierarchical state is the best, strongly disagree. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion even if it's wrong. Disagree. The stronger the leadership, the better, strongly disagree. Democracy is more than a decision-making process. Democracy is more than a decision-making process, I think, but not in a good way. I'm going to agree, because it is. Environmental regulations are essential, disagree. A better world will come from automation, science and technology. Better for who? Well, it's not going to be better for humans, but it's going to be better for getting rid of humans faster. See what I mean? This is not what the question... This is not at all what the test means by these questions. Like, the test wasn't expecting my religious views to be Lainism, was it? Like, I think everyone should have a meme religion that they made up or just do whatever they want and call it a religion because it's funny. That's why I said that, but they're going to think I'm like a fundamental Christian or something. A better world will come from automation, science and technology. You see, I think that a better world will be a post-human world, which will come from accelerated technology. So I'm going to agree. But that's not what they think. Children should be educated in religious or traditional values, strongly disagree. Traditions are no value on their own, strongly agree. Religions should play a role in the government, strongly disagree. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed, strongly agree. Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life. I agree with this, but I think it's a good thing. It's important that we work as a united world to combat climate change. I don't think we should combat climate change. Combat climate change is a loaded term, once again, because this test is bullshit and doesn't account for people who aren't fucking normies. I think that we shouldn't be working to it's too late to combat it. We need to be working to survive or thrive or make a use of it. Watch climate change is a good thing, actually. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate. If we want to combat climate, I'll say what it wants. If we want to combat climate change, then we need to work as a united world. So yeah, agree. Society was better many years ago than it is now. Disagree. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. Strongly disagree. It's important that we think in the long term beyond our lifespans. It's not important, but it's not unimportant. Agree. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. I don't like culture, I don't like reason. This is bullshit. Agree, fine. Drug use should be legalized, agree. Same-sex marriage should be legal, agree. Strongly agree. No cultures are superior to others. Agree. Sex outside marriage is immoral, strongly disagree. If we accept migrants at all, it is important that they are assimilate into our culture. I don't care, but I'll just disagree with that. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. Strongly disagree. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. Strongly disagree. I support single-payer universal healthcare. Agree. Prostitution should be illegal. Strongly disagree. Maintaining family values is essential. Strongly disagree. To chase progress at all costs is dangerous. I agree that it's dangerous, but I think it's a good danger. What am I supposed to see? I agree. Fine. Genetic modification is accused for good, force for good, even on humans. Strongly agree. Get ready for hyper racism, guys. Oh, I love to talk about hyper racism. You guys ready for me to talk about hyper racism? So Nick Land, if you should look into Nick Land if you don't know who he is. Read Fang Newman, but Nick Land has this term called hyper racism, and it fucks with people because it's such a ridiculous term, hyper racism, that in the future there will be hyper racism, and people are like, what? But what he's actually talking about is people who are like genetically modified to be actually superior to humans will be really racist against inferior humans. That's hyper racism, and I can't wait. It's going to be hilarious. So anyway, we should open our borders to immigration. It will ensure the destruction of capitalism, so agree. Governments should be as concerned about foreign citizens as they are about those within their borders. Disagree. Because government concern generally means government control. All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Fuck. Because I don't think all people should be treated equally, but I do think that sexuality is not a reason to not treat people equally. I don't think capitalists should be treated equally to like my friends or something like that. I don't think people should be treated equally. No. It's important that we further my group's goals above all others. I don't really have a group. Disagree. What did I get? I got to economic access. Closest match, social libertarianism. Yeah, fucking boring. I'm obviously not that. Very progressive. Libertarian. Of course I'm not authoritarian. Diplomatic access, peaceful. Yeah, sure. Economic access, social. See, I tend towards socialism. Fuck. Well, I don't like this. I don't like this test at all. But that gives you a pretty good idea of why I don't like this test. Now you understand my way of thinking, right? Societal axis is very progressive. Civil axis, libertarian. That just means against like libertarian is in not authoritarian, which is true. Peaceful. I don't want either. I don't want either globalism or nationalism. Both are bad. I don't. And the economic equality is like a non-thing. It's just like no Marxist wants economic well, some do, but that's not the point. Yeah, that test was bullshit. Fuck's sake. See what do you see what I mean? I can't explain this to people. Right? I can't like if someone asks me what I think, I can't be like, well, post-human anarcho-moss world now, because it doesn't, like, they're just gonna be like, well, what the fuck are you talking about? You're insane. You're an insane person, which may be true, but saying that discredits me is you're a terrible person if you think insane people can't also be correct. You're just wrong. Insane people are often the most correct. Sanity is subjective. There you go. I think that's, you know what, I've gone on for long enough. I've gone on for long enough. I hope I've cleared some things up there. If you have any questions about what I think about certain things, just hop into the Discord, which I'll link in the description. See you later, guys.